And we're back again on this Friday morning. Thanks for everybody for listening here on Prepper Talk Radio, here on K-Talk, KBJA. I guess that's what it is, learning that new call sign. Thanks for listening. You've listening to Scott and Shane here. And Scott, how you doing this morning?
I'm struggling, but I'm here.
I'm glad you're here.
Woke up on the right side of the bed with the wrong side of my head. My neck's jacked, so I'm working on that. But, dude, I didn't want to miss today because we've got an awesome show.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get into that here quickly, but we do need to, of course, acknowledge our sponsor, Survival Medical, survival-medical.com. We truly love these products. We love the company. We love everybody associated with it. So we admonish you to go check out survival-medical.com and better get some stuff ordered before tomorrow, all right? Tomorrow's the end of the world, so you better order some stuff.
Well, depending on which theory you want to follow.
Exactly.
But yes, there is a biblical theory that tomorrow is the end of the world. Now, this is a theory made up by mathematicians who use some kind of numeric code, I guess.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more. We're going to talk with our guest. Let's bring him on. Ben, are you there? Can you hear us? Let's see here. There we go. Ben, are you there? Can you hear us?
Absolutely. I am here. Good morning.
Fantastic. Hey, sorry for having you on hold for so long. How you been? It's been quite a while.
It has been, but, I have to say Utah is in my heart more than most states, and it is always fun to have anything to do with your great state.
We'd love to hear that from you. That's awfully nice of you.
I have a bit of an interesting history, a bit of an interesting, although short history in Utah, and it left an impression. We'll put it that way. But I'm very happy to be here, and very appreciative that you've brought me around to chat. I thank you guys very much.
Well, our last conversation with you was a lot of fun, and so let me back up a little bit here.
Yeah, let's make sure we get a full introduction here.
Those of you out there probably know the name Ben Davidson. Those of you who came to our very first PrepperCon got to meet Ben, and it was a fantastic discussion. And I'm assuming that's what you were referring to, Ben, when you came out for the first PrepperCon?
Yes, but I also tend to keep pretty good track of where people are from when I'm interacting with them via email or in other places, and certain people are just a certain way in certain places of the country, and you notice that.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, Utah's a little bit different.
We are definitely
in good ways and bad. Every state has its good and bad, but there's quite a bit of good here. And it's funny because the last time we had you on, we actually had a few phone calls of people that were like arguing against credibility, and they're like, well, you can't just pick up some guy off the street and have him talk about stuff. I'm like, we picked him up because NASA picked him up. So it's kind of fun to have you here because let's give everybody a little bit more background on you. You're actually a lawyer, right?
Well, I have a degree, but I never practiced law.
Right.
Okay.
So, but by training, it's the legal side of digging in and researching, which is, in my understanding, probably one of the most fully focused types of research you can do because you've got to prepare for anything.
One thing
no two cases are alike, so you end up having to become a quasi-expert in a different thing every single week, which really, really trains you for the world of space and Earth and how things are changing and fears people have about things that are happening in the world. It really gives you a good foundation for that.
And I think, if anything, we are supportive of self-education here on our show, of getting out there and learning for yourself and not depending on someone else to teach you what they think they know, right? Get out there and learn it for yourself.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about what you do, Ben.
Sure.
I've got a list of all of your websites here. What is your primary site that you kind of focus on, or is there one of all these different sites?
Well, it really does depend on what you're interested in.
Okay.
If you're more interested in how the sun and earth interact, it's spaceweathernews.com. If you're interested in earthquakes, it's quakewatch.net. If you only like checking in every once in a while to learn about how Earth's magnetic reversal and pole reversal is going, that would be earthchanges.org. The one that sort of throws them all together is suspiciousobservers.org, and the O in observers is a 0.
And you have a YouTube channel in that same name as well.
Absolutely.
Do you have any other channels, or is that your only?
That is my only one.
YouTube. Okay, perfect. That's the one that I watch all the time. So every morning you do a space weather forecast, correct?
Right.
Tell us a little bit about what that entails, and if people aren't already watching it, why they should check this out.
Oh, well, it's quite simple. I was interested in what the sun was doing with some of the new satellites, some of the science that was coming out talking about, hey, this has electrical effects from the top of the sky down into the mantle. Mm-hmm. And so that really got me interested. I've always been interested in weather and earthquakes and things like that. And it just so happens that when I decided to start reporting about all these things all at the same time, it was really quite obvious that nobody had ever, by some fate of luck, ever tried that before, because all it took was just reporting those things together every day. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Every time I'm reporting this one thing, I'm also reporting this other thing. The patterns just started to emerge. And you briefly mentioned before the thing with NASA. That is one of the patterns that emerged is the one that was confirmed by statisticians at Ohio State, and the paper was written with me by a NASA scientist, Dr. Uyen, who's probably one of the most brilliant people in his field. But it's not a matter of any real brilliance on our part. It's a matter of keen observation on our part, and the fact that we are pretty good at noticing patterns. Which aren't actually that difficult to spot when you're looking at these things every day diligently. 365 days a year the news comes out, and it's been that way since 2011. So it's easy to see the patterns come and the patterns go, and it usually starts with the sun.
And I think that's absolutely true in pretty much every aspect of prepping. It is difficult to keep your eye on everything that's going on out there. But if you do, if you can, then you can see patterns emerge. And kind of like what we want to talk about, what's going to happen tomorrow. So that's part of our conversation piece we want to talk a little bit about. And so, I think that all, just like you're saying, there's a lot of different pieces that have to come together to make your mind put those puzzle pieces together and say, oh, this is more than a coincidence, right?
Well, and it's also finding the information from credible sources, right?
Right.
As preppers, there's a ton of misinformation out there. Well, even not even as preppers, just as Americans listening to the news, there's a lot of misinformation, right? Hop on the internet and you get a lot of misinformation because people will find something and they'll post it or they'll share it and they won't read it, but they'll be like, oh, it claims this and that's the truth, or it's just not from a credible source. And so, understanding who's credible and understanding what's really going on makes a huge difference. It saves you a lot of time.
And to really figure that out for yourself, you have to do that research for yourself to come up with your own sources of who's credible and who's not. And I've been doing that over the past several years. I used to have a huge list of people I would listen to, right, and read their blogs and so forth. And I've really whittled it down to really just a handful at this point. And Suspicious Observers is on that short list. So let's get into the topic. So I've got a number of topics I want to cover today. What should we do first, Scott? What do you think? Should we talk about what's happening tomorrow? Or should we
Let's talk about tomorrow.
Okay, cool. So
you just have this look of super excitement to talk about that topic. I can't hold off anymore. I've got to let you do it.
What do you think, Ben? Tell us what you think about what's happening on September 23rd. Okay, let's talk about the facts. What is factually happening in the heavens tomorrow?
Well, I can say that it is slightly more interesting than when the world ended last year on September 23rd, when Saturn was involved in those 3 planet alignments in that constellation, but not quite as interesting as when the world ended in 2011 on September 23rd, when Comet Elenin was one of the 3 objects used.
Right.
So I would say that this probably ranks up there in one of the best, one of the better ways to play it.
Okay, so let's outline this. Sorry, keep going.
I was just, unfortunately, the way that the planets and the stars are, almost every single year, almost every single month, you can have these, three planet or these 2 planets in a comet, 3 planets in a significant star like Regulus, things like that. And it happens every single year.
Okay.
So that's what's happening in the heavens. And in terms of some of the effect that we have seen the planets actually have on the Earth and the Sun, this certainly isn't low on the list, but it's
Okay.
not the highest we've seen. I am certainly not expecting the world to end tomorrow. I wasn't expecting the world to end every other year that September 23rd was the doomsday.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's focus on that a little bit more. What we are seeing is we're seeing a correlation between Revelation chapter 12 and this event in the heavens. So basically, it's constellation Virgo within the constellation Leo. It has a certain orientation with Mars, Mercury, and Venus, and Jupiter coming into that constellation and exiting in a certain manner. That this is so rare that hasn't happened in 7,000 years.
Well, that's certainly not true.
Okay.
This planetary configuration happens almost exactly like this every couple of decades. Something utterly close to this, or you know how this is where Jupiter is coming into. Twice in the last 20 years, it actually was there, and we had the perfect alignment of those.
Okay.
I'm not sure about the 7,000-year claim, but that one's probably got to need a little fact check.
Okay. Good to know. Now, another aspect of this is has something to do with Planet X, Nibiru, or Planet 9, whichever one kind of theory you subscribe to. That is an unknown planet, something that is hypothesized or theorized, right?
Yep.
Who knows if it really exists, but it's going to interact somehow with this constellation and what's happening in the sky. What is your take on these different planets, like Planet X and Nibiru and Planet 9?
Well, Planet 9 might be real, but the Planet 9 they talk about is in stable orbit out there, probably with thousands of other companions out in the Kuiper Belt that are between the size of our moon and maybe Mars. There's definitely nothing in the solar system and nothing that's going to interact there. People don't realize that NASA, governments, experts, they don't actually discover comets and asteroids.
Mm-hmm.
It's the tens of thousands of amateur astronomers,
right,
not the 4 or 5 officials that actually do this at the place. That's where they get a lot of their names, like Comet Elenin, or things like that. These
Those
are amateurs that are finding them.
Yeah.
And people don't realize most of these amateurs, not all, of course not all, but so many of these amateurs would love to be the one to find something like this and love it in people's faces.
Absolutely.
People, if they begin to understand that the sun has this thing called a heliosphere, most people can understand that there's this magnetic shell around the Earth, but the sun has one too.
Mm-hmm.
And when the sun blasts the Earth, what happens because of its interaction with Earth's magnetic field? That's how we get those beautiful auroras, those amazing colors around the North and South poles. Well, what happens when two stars interact? The moment another star system came anywhere near our sun's magnetic bubble and they started exchanging plasma like that, the sights that you would see in the sky, they would not even be describable. Nighttime wouldn't be nighttime. It would be lit up with with the color of all the ionized gases and solar wind, changing energy levels and different electron levels and things like that.
And where our music has come up, so we've got to go to break. So we'll come back on the other side of the break, and I guess we can either pick up here or we can switch to our next topic.
Let's keep going.
But everybody, thanks for listening here to Prepper Talk Radio, and
brought to you by Survival Medical.
Yes, as I stumbled there. Brought to you by Survival Medical. Medical.com. Check them out.
Faster than the leaves this.
All right, let's come right back in. You're listening to here on Scott and Shane here on Prepper Talk Radio. Thanks for joining us. And our special guest, Ben Davidson. And, of course, we don't want to forget our wonderful sponsor, Survival Medical, survival-medical.com. Please check them out. Now, we left the break talking a little bit about what's happening tomorrow. I don't want to spend too much more time on this topic because we really have a lot more I want to cover that really is a little bit more important. So where did we leave off, Scott?
Well, you were talking about if there were another star event where the two stars were our sun and the other star were sharing or I guess trading plasma.
Here's probably the best way to think about this whole situation with tomorrow. most people who are listening to this should be prepping anyway. They should be ready for something to happen any day, any time. However, I'm sitting here saying that I've watched this happen year in and year out. 2012 was the year they didn't use a September doom date. They decided to go with the Mayans on December 21st. But, what I would say is you should be prepped like always. Definitely should never be cowering in fear. That's a thief that'll just steal your time and focus from things you need to be doing. And on the 24th, you'll know who was right and who was wrong.
And I think, and I think the point here is, like you're saying, you should be prepping anyway. And whether something is going to happen tomorrow or not, I think it should be a sign. Regardless if it is or not, it should be a sign for everyone to say, you know what, I'm not very prepared. Just even over this last week, I've had people calling me up, Shane, you come shopping with me. I don't know what to buy, and this and asking me about what kind of water filters you should get, and people being a little bit nervous about what's going on because they're not prepared.
Well, and there's a lot more things going on that make people feel unprepared, right? The fires, the hurricanes, the tornadoes, and we're only hearing, a lot of us in the U.S. are only hearing about what's going on in the U.S. Some of us heard about the huge earthquake in Mexico City. They had the one off the coast not even a week before. And then there's flooding going all over India. Yeah. I mean, it's not just the United States that's having turmoil.
Yeah, so let's use that to transition, Ben. What is going on in our world? Is it things are a little crazy right now, or is that just us thinking this way?
Well, it was interesting because perfect switch of topics, because it was actually my search of the Nibiru topic that took me into what I inevitably had to conclude, although I didn't initially like it as much as I was interested in the Crossing Planet story. What I've been forced to put my ego aside and conclude is really going on here. And it is, in my mind, a little scarier than something that left our ancestors able to tell stories about. So, I mean, it couldn't have been that bad as it was. All these stories survived somehow. Anyway, transitioning on. So I started looking at the planets and see, okay, well, hey, look, if Earth is changing and it's because of that, then we got to see something in the other planets. And it turns out we see changes on just about every other planet, but nothing gravitational. Everything appears to be meteorological or space weather based, like it's some kind of aurora or auroral power that we've never seen before. It's all of these meteorological changes that we're seeing on these other planets, just like on Earth. And I can confirm, looking at some of the other planets' moons through my scope just a couple days ago, there's not a single moon out of place in the entire solar system. There's nothing gravitationally yanking things out of the way. And Saturn would be a complete mess if anything came anywhere, towards it. All of its moons would get thrown all over the place, especially its outer one.
So you're saying, okay, if Planet 9 or Planet X or Nibiru were coming in, it would mess up their orbits and such.
Oh yeah, I actually had the hubris to say to myself, all right, you know what, I'm going to go take a look at some of the moons, and I'm going to discover one that's out of place, and I'm going to be the guy who shows that this thing's coming in. Little do I know that there's literally tens of thousands of people who are tens of thousands of times better at this than I am,
doing
with
the same
tens
thing.
of thousands of times better scopes, who are constantly checking all of these things every single day from all these places around the world. And so I kind of got put in my place on that one too. But still, we needed an explanation for these meteorological changes that were happening on all the planets, and especially for why it was happening on Earth more than anywhere else. And, for the changes on all the planets, it's the kind of thing you'd expect to see if there was a major change in solar activity. And that's precisely what we are seeing. And in Earth, it's interesting because the only thing that's sort of our protective interface between us and the sun, our magnetic field that I was talking about, that bubble that's around our planet, it's weakening. It's the only thing blocking out that cosmic energy. And as it's weakening, we're seeing Earth with greater such effects than we're seeing on some of the other planets, relatively. And so you come up with this situation where, okay, every 400 years, sun does this, and that's what the data shows. That appears to about be the Mayan Baktun, by the way, which is 390 some years. It really started to show itself as solar maximum was pathetic in 2012, so that's another interesting little lineup there.
Mm-hmm.
And then right after that, it sort of, throughout history, has sputtered into a grand solar minimum. This is what appears to cause, or at least be temporally correlated in time, that is, with mini ice ages, or the things they call little ice ages on the planet. And we're sort of heading into that period now. And it's interesting because we've only been observing the planets for what's known as the solar grand maximum period of the last, few decades. And so they've sort of all been behaving a certain way. And now that the sun is sort of taking a dive, all the planets are really changing, and so is the Earth.
Okay, so to kind of clarify a little bit, let me interrupt you a little quick. So to kind of clarify, we've noticed our magnetic shield of the Earth being weakened for how long would you say we've been noticing that?
We've been noticing it for only the last couple of decades.
Okay.
And do we know the cause of what? Do we know the cause? What's causing our magnetic field to weaken?
No, that one's really, really tough. It's tough to know what's causing the sun to be on this 400-year cycle too, but at least that one is. We can peg down the cycle.
So as of 2012, we entered into that Maunder minimum. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, no. We in 2012 we were supposed to be peaking up into solar maximum, and it was quite anemic. It was one of the weaker solar maximums that we had seen, and it was on the heels of the longest and lowest solar minimum of the space age. And what I mean by that solar maximum and solar minimum, because I've been talking about that over longer scales before, just like you can see the stock market go up and down over time, but if you zoom in on one day, it's actually not a straight line. It's jagged. It's going jaggedy up and down over time. Well, the sun does that too. Over 400 years, it goes up and it goes down. For the past few decades, we've been in the grand maximum, and we're expected to go into the grand minimum here very shortly. Okay. But over a shorter period, just 11 years, the sun does that jagged up and down, and that is also very reliable on the 11-year period. And so about 2008, 2009, we started to realize, hey, wait a minute, this shorter 11-year cycle minimum period, it's lasting way too long, and it is way lower than even we expected a minimum to be. And it was followed in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014 with a very anemic solar maximum, again on that shorter 11-year cycle. Now, this is the sort of thing that is expected to happen before the sun fully dips down into the grand minimum. And so timing-wise, looking back over history, and in the signals that the sun is actually giving, both of those arrows are pointing towards, hey, the sun is taking a dive, and that's actually affecting the whole solar system. Mm-hmm. But so, really, the scarier part of it is Earth's pole reversal and the weakening of Earth's magnetic shield. That is by far the scarier part of it.
Yeah, let's get into that a little bit. Let's. So we're thinking, okay, the sun is supposed to enter into a minimum cycle here, yet we're seeing extremes in weather, and we're seeing our shield being weakened. How does this all make sense? I mean, why would the sun going into a minimum make our weather more extreme?
Okay, well, normally we see energy focused in certain areas of the Earth. Okay. We normally see it in a few powerful tropical systems, and even if it's not hurricane season for us, it's cyclone season for Australia, maybe. Or maybe it's cyclone season in the North Indian Ocean. So there's always this concentration of that cyclone energy somewhere. And above that, it's usually in the jets, both the polar vortex and the jet streams. When the sun is really active, those things are really, really strong, and they tighten up. And so when the sun is really powerful, we don't get a lot of polar vortex events down into lower latitudes. Okay. It stays tight and strong and fast up at the poles. And the jet stream, it doesn't waver and wobble and have jet stream blocking that causes, the terrible flooding in 2011. sorts of thing, the jet stream is much flatter and you get much more expected weather. But when the sun doesn't produce, you have this sort of collapse of the upper atmosphere, and this starts to disrupt the jets, and the jet streams get wavy, and they start to have jet stream blocking, which is why you get these crazy flood events. This is why monsoon patterns get disrupted in India. This is what happened in 2011, just on the heels of that extra long and low solar minimum period on that shorter 11-year scale. The tropical cyclone activity increases dramatically in terms of number. And when there is that sparse solar activity during those minima periods where there is a lot more of the tropical cyclone activity, even if it's generally lesser intense, that solar activity tends to have a very powerful effect of intensification on those cyclones. And that is unfortunately what we saw with Harvey and Irma there.
I guess my next question is what can we expect from here? I mean, where, if the sun is going into further into a grand minimum, like you say, are things going to get worse weather-wise?
Certainly. There's going to be more of the weird weather of all kinds, and except for folks in very, very certain places in the world, they know that some of the cold extremes are just as extreme as some of the hot extremes they're seeing. The floods, the droughts, the storms when they come, the 24 to 48-hour shifts between, hey, wow, it's 20 degrees above normal. Hey, that was a heck of a hailstorm we just had. Hey, wow, next day it is 20 degrees below normal. These fast shifts combined with the worst weather is probably what you can expect to see meteorologically. But of course, it goes much beyond meteorologically. There's problems with our technology, and there's problems with the lithosphere. There's problems with our health as well, directly related to the fading magnetic field. So which one of those do you want to hit first?
Let's talk about our health. I think that's a
interesting.
really interesting point. People don't think of what the magnetic field does and how the sun affects our human body. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's start off with the magnetic fields. That weakening magnetic field, like what does that really do to our body?
Well, it's not that the weakening does something to our body. It's that everything that it blocks out has the potential to do something to our body. And so, studies are now coming out and finally confirming what many have thought for a long time, that extremes to one end or the other, either extreme lows or extreme highs in solar activity, can be correlated with things like strokes, heart attacks, psychiatric problems, from everything from bipolar episodes to hospitalizable depression to suicide, psychotic breaks, things like that. And it's for a lot of the same reasons why folks who work in that industry, they will tell you that, hey, the moon matters. Full moon matters to some of these people. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that light, different kinds of light, have an incredible influence on us. And what the magnetic field is a magnetic shell. And what we see coming in is visible light. We all know that ultraviolet light comes in as well, because, we've all heard of suntan lotion and skin cancer and getting tan and things like that. But the whole range from radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible, ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays, they are all coming in, and they are all electromagnetic radiation.
Wow.
That's what photons are. And so our magnetic field that blocks out that electromagnetic radiation, it really is as simple as it is sounding right now.
Now, we've had a few phone calls we missed. Sorry about that. Feel free to give a call back in.
Right.
We'll try and this is all so interesting stuff. I'm just enthralled in this.
It's
so
hard
if
to
you
break
have
up
a question,
conversations.
it is difficult to break up. So if you have a call, feel free to call back in.
So
we'll
really,
try and get you on the air.
It sounds like to simplify it quite a bit, or dumb it down quite a bit. The sun puts off a lot of different types of rays,
Harmful.
Everything from EMPs and everything. I mean,
From the
right.
yeah.
And then our solar, or our field, which is our gravitational field, is almost like a Faraday cage that protects us, and it's when it's weakened or when there's more holes in it, more stuff gets through that can damage us, our electronics, and everything else.
Okay, we've got a call come back in here. Caller, you're live on the air. Did you have a question or comment for us?
Yeah, I've been waiting for him to discuss the photo conversion factor of the forest that we have, as a human impact, brought more deforestation than any time in history.
Okay,
and that's the great mediator of the weather.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your call. Did you have anything else you wanted to address?
No, that's it.
Okay.
I did a PBS program on the impact of a tree, a single tree, and I don't hear anybody in this climate change discussion ever talk about the real mediating factor, which is the forests or the green growth on the earth.
All right, great comment. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. We'll have to get back to that after this commercial break, and we want to, of course, acknowledge our sponsor, Survival Medical, survival-medical.com. Check them out. We'll see you guys after the break. All right, let's get right back into this as Scott and I have our conversations about solar power.
We're going crazy off air, but want to start off. We've got an announcement we need to make. Our Lady of Lourdes Magna celebrates 85th annual spaghetti dinner. So Our Lady of Lourdes Parish at 2864 South, 9000 West in Magna will hold its annual spaghetti dinner from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. Sunday, September 24th. That's this Sunday. Takeout orders begin at 11 a.m. The cost is $14 for adults. Dine in, all you can eat. $13 takeout and $8 for children aged 12 and under. This is a family-friendly event, open to the public and accessible to people with disabilities. Parishioners are also baking up some wonderful homemade pizzellas, which is an Italian waffle cookie, for purchase. The Council of Catholic Women will be selling raffle tickets for one-of-a-kind baskets and prizes. And new this year, Notre Dame-themed adult beverage garden. Appropriate ideas required. This is the parish's largest fundraising event of the year. Many of us volunteering and planning this event worked side by side as children with our families year after year. Getting ready for this and serving others from all over takes a lot of time and resources, but we love it, said Mark Manzener. I'm sorry, Mark. Spaghetti dinner chair. So come have Sunday dinner with us. So get in there. Phone calls. You can get in and get pre-ordered stuff done at 801-301-3318. And that's this Sunday from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. at 2864 South, 9000 West in Magna.
Very cool. And, of course, don't forget our sponsor, Survival Medical, survival-medical.com. First aid for the future. You like that?
Yes.
All right, cool. So let's get back into our discussion here. Our last caller wanted to talk about how all this
deforestation.
Deforestation and how this is all affecting
the
our
power
forests.
of a tree.
Yeah, absolutely. Take it away.
All right. Well, your car has an input on the climate system too. Simply because the sun and Earth's fading magnetic field are clearly enormous drivers, doesn't mean that all of known science and everything you've ever heard is wrong, at least not completely wrong. Deforestation is a big thing, and but when I talk about this stuff all the time, I always say that we have to stop polluting and we have to take better care of our planet, and that certainly includes deforestation. Now, I am aware of the PBS program on the power of a tree, and interestingly, the power of a tree is actually increasing, and that's part of the reason why the deforestation thing, terrible though it may be, needs to be rethought. Plants, microbes, plankton, they do what every single other animal or what every other life form on this planet does when more food is around. They eat more. That is an inescapable truth on this planet. Not my greatest detractor could deny it, and it is true for everything from plankton to plants as well. And as CO2 goes up, for example, they eat more as well, which mitigates a lot of that effect. Their primary effect is on the precipitation, where it comes down, how much is evaporating, and a little bit on the albedo as well. I would also say that if humans were to get flicked off of this planet tomorrow, our deforestation would be basically undetectable in a few centuries. So it's a terrible problem, don't get me wrong, but in its place, perspective, at least in my mind. And getting onto the CO2 thing, this is something else that really should reframe it for everybody. I don't know if you heard the big climate bombshell that dropped this week, but it's got everyone who's paying attention in a tizzy, and the people who are at the top in the one-sided climate change story called man-made global warming basically clammed up shut about it. So the folks who invented the climate budgets, how climate affects temperature, it was basically one group of scientists, the best at what they do, but they created the stuff, and they call it the carbon budget. How much can we spend in carbon emissions versus how much is the planet going to warm in their eyes? And these guys are the ones who, all those hundreds of papers, the thousands of scientists, the now hundreds of billions in grants, the 97% consensus, it's all based on the model that these guys came up with. So these are the guys. These aren't some conspiracy theorists. These aren't the tractors. This isn't the oil companies. This isn't Heartland Institute. This is mainstream global warmists here, and the top of them, where it all starts. They just came back and said, we overestimated carbon's effect by 50%.
Whoa.
Now, what that means is they say that the Earth is about 1 degree warmer, and we're talking Celsius here, so those will have to forgive me for that. They say humans have caused 93% of it, or 0.93 degrees of that warming. Now, they've revised that down by 0.3, which takes you down to about 0.63. And so if you go from about 0.63 to 0.93, well, you've basically added half your original amount. They had a 50% overestimation, and that's just on their first glance. And there's no account. They did account a bit for the sun and volcanoes, more in this, but no accounting for Earth's magnetic field weakening, which the moment that goes into models, it's going to change things even more. But as it stands today, we basically just had the humans cut down to half of climate change, which begs the question, where's the other half of climate change coming from?
Well, I think the truth that you spoke earlier is that the increase of CO2 just increases the growth of trees and plant life and such.
Absolutely. But basically what their conclusion came out to, and this is an example of how something small gets amplified in the real world from a model. So even though they overestimated by 50%, which is basically 1.5 times reality, not even twice what it should have been. What it means in terms of the carbon budget is we can emit 3 times as much carbon in their eyes before we hit the scary 1.5 degree mark. Now, this isn't now Ben Davidson says this, or now the Heartland Institute says this. Now, mainstream climate says we can pump out 3 times as much as we thought.
Wow.
Before hitting that.
That's really interesting.
Now, whether or not those numbers are accurate, I don't know, but it really begs the question of, how much of an effect are these other things having, and what direction are they going in to change the planet even further? And unfortunately, the sun and magnetic field are not going in good direction.
Absolutely.
Well, let's definitely keep that in mind. And let's skip topics. Let's change topics here real quick.
Yeah, we
only
really
have
want to
about
get
5
into
minutes left.
To the recent disasters, and really what's going to happen with earthquakes, I think, is where Shane's going.
Yes, exactly. And you have this wonderful thing called the Disaster Prediction app. Let's talk about that briefly, and then how we can use that to prepare ourselves.
Okay, sure. Well, the Disaster Prediction app, it's available on Apple and Android devices, and it has 2 main functions. It holds the alert map for earthquakes, which has, in the 11 months since its inception, 11 months and 7 days now, since its inception, has correctly alerted, or however you'd want to call it, 6 of the 8 locations for magnitude 7 and larger earthquakes, including the magnitude 8 that struck Mexico, just days ago, which has triggered basically nonstop aftershocks, including that terrible thing that happened in Mexico City. just a few days ago.
So I guess my next question for you is how can we use that here on the Wasatch Front, where we're right on a fault line, and I know maybe your maps don't get that detailed.
Well, to be honest, in Utah, I would not be too worried about that.
Okay.
In Utah, your biggest thing with the weakening magnetosphere, and another great thing about Utah is it's positioned very well for the geomagnetic system and the global electric circuit. If I live in the new Valley of the Sun down here in Albuquerque, you guys are in the new Mountains of the Sun, because that's one of the last places that'll get blacked out of power.
Okay.
But if the sun rocks and rolls, everywhere's going to get blacked out of power. What's really interesting for you guys there is you guys are not exactly at sea level. Neither am I, and the density of the air that we don't have above us, because we are so high up in the sky, matters. Now, I know that there are parts of Utah that are listening that are probably a little lower in elevation than others, but in general, that radiation, which doesn't just come from the sun, by the way, it comes from the galaxy and other galaxies as well. We call those cosmic rays. And those ones are, can be as or maybe even more damaging, especially in terms of, some of the, non-life-threatening things like whether you get cataract, whether you develop a DNA mutation that causes a tumor, things like that.
Now, with your disaster prediction app, we're still going to be concerned about earthquakes here. I mean, that's something we prepare for. How can this help us? I mean, I noticed that there was an alert this morning. It came about 6:50 this morning about I guess an alert along the west coast of Canada. Is that something that we should be concerned about?
Probably not something in terms of the earthquake for you guys.
Okay.
Unfortunately, most of the earthquakes that happen in the interior of the United States are either because of fracking or because of a phosphorus mine. I think it's really interesting that there's this swarm of quakes under Monsanto's phosphorus mine in Idaho, and everyone on the internet's trying to blame Yellowstone. But anyway, gotta love Monsanto.
I've noticed that, and it's kind of funny because that fault line is also different than where our fault line is, and so people are like, "Oh, it's going to hit us." I'm like, "They're not connected."
Well, to be honest, the app is best for you guys because of its space weather capabilities. It is the fastest space weather alert notification system in the world. It is not only that, but it has space weather health alerts, and so. We're not talking fastest, we're talking now only. It is the only app in the world that delivers the space weather health alerts. They will mostly be tied to, the actual alert that gets sent out will mostly be tied to the cardiac and the psychiatric risks. But there is a chart that is in the app. We're actually in the middle of reformulating it and making it, expanding it and even, including more things on there that you can go and you can see, okay, well, this just happened. All right, what does that mean? You go look on the chart, you say, oh, okay, I just got that alert. Okay, this is what I have to watch out for. Okay, well, I'm not a high-risk cardiac patient. I'm not this. Okay, well, emotional instability and cognitive diminution, which is basically, losing focus. That can apply to anyone.
Now, Ben, we're down to our last 10 seconds here before the commercial comes in. We wanted to, of course, thank you for coming on. This is all fantastic information. Everybody go into the App Store, check out the Disaster Prediction app, check out Suspicious Observers on YouTube, as well as all the other channels you have online if you're interested in this kind of stuff, which, for me, fascinating stuff. Any last few things you'd like to say, Ben?
Yeah, the real place to visit is observatoryproject.com. We have an amazing conference coming up in February called Observing the Frontier.
That's right. Fantastic. Yes, everybody check that out. Go to this conference. It's excellent, fun stuff. And, of course, visit our sponsor's website, Survival Medical, survival-medical.com. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll be back again next week. Thanks, man. Good to talk to you.
Absolutely, guys.